Right. I think we've already hinted at this, and Bill and I have been working for a long time trying to understand how meaning is made, particularly influenced by the digital initially because of its affordances for multimodal meaning, and noticing that multimodality was not a static or separate categories, that we can move from the visual to the textual to the audio, and that very often in meaning making, that's what we do. And we need to understand grammar in a much different way than we have in the past, and particularly now with the evolution of AI in meaning making and its potential to harness multimodality as well, as Bill says, through the use of words labeling the other modes, but it's a very different moment about understanding how meaning is made in an educational context, or any context, in fact.
So this is our theory of the forms of meaning. And one of the things we try to do with this diagram, and as I say in those books there's a very long playing version of this argument, is that text and speech could hardly be more different. So what we do with text is we organize stuff on a two-dimensional plane the same way we do with image, and we organize them in space, right? What we do with speech, it's very much like sound, an embodied experience, that it happens really in time, and it happens in a linear kind of way. So these are kind of profoundly different, and it becomes important because generative AI is a purely textual, in essence, a purely textual technology, yes. And these differences become important.
Yes, and it uses tokens for the other modes, right? Language tokens for the other modes as well, in producing the other modes.
So these are a set of differences between text and speech that, again, we've elaborated elsewhere in our work, and there's a citation down the bottom there. The most important point, though, is that forming language is a multilinear process. So we're going to move into a complicated argument now about the way in which we operate with text. So what we do is, we type something, we go back and correct it. We're very, very concise, and we're very careful with the text that we put together. In a way, with language, with spoken language, there are clauses and rambling and repetitions and all of those kinds of things. So written language ends up being concise and well formed in a way that oral language is not, and that's what generative AI leverages. It makes the most of that because distributional structure, weights, remember all that stuff? Well, that stuff, we've got original texts which have been very carefully crafted. And by the way, they're published texts, which some editor's been over them as well, and removed redundancy and being explicit when things are not explicit. Whereas with orality, as we heard from Walter Ong, in the first video, things, there's a lot of shared assumptions because we're in the same space and we're in the same time. Whereas what we've got to do with language is we have to cross time and space. And look, this, by the way, is why this is such a terrible, terrible idea in the digital era. Because what we've done is with keyboarding and with computing, we've developed a way of being much, much more methodical than we ever were about text. You type the sentence roughly, you go back and you re-edit it, you look at it again. And handwriting is really resistant to that. So anybody who says, let's go back to handwriting, look, I can't handwrite anymore. My handwriting's terrible, always was, but it's got to the point where it's impossible. But also one of the things is I just want to be able to refine what I'm thinking by the editing capacities in computing, which we've now had for, 40, 50 years or something if we've been using computers from the start. So, one of the things is if people say the solution to cheating with generative AI is this, it's a terrible, terrible idea because the methodicalness of writing is now baked into the technology of keyboarding.
Also, if we go back to Socrates, knowledge, its production and use, is not just based on memory.
Right,
and this relies on memory. It goes right back to Socrates and says memory in your head is most important. But now, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or whatever, you're drawing on more than your memory, in order to engage in the activities that you engage. And we need to be able to evaluate how we do that, to test how we do it and how effective it is. But to go back to just memory seems anachronistic given what's happening in the world at the moment.
Right, handwriting and memory. So again, you might have noticed that Mary and I have rely a lot on the work of Michael Halliday. Again, spoken and written language are surprisingly different. We've just put up this list here again. Full disclosure, this is ChatGPT synthesizing a whole lot of Halliday. We know Halliday pretty well, but it's actually a great synthesis about these profound differences between text and speech. But it's the peculiarities of text, and particularly published text, which make the LLM so powerful as writing and thinking tools.
Yes. And it's not a whim that we make this distinction as powerfully as we're trying to make it, but we think this moment with the large language models requires us to understand the role that language specifically plays in meaning making and the production of meaning.
And now this generation, the generation 3 of AI.
Yeah.
So here are some big generalizations that we're going to make now about text semantic AI specifically. In these videos, we can't get much into multimodality. That's almost another whole subject, but we've said enough, which is it leverages the text semantic stuff in a whole lot of ways. So firstly, what we have is this very systematically ordered published text. Editors been through it. People are very careful with stuff that's published in a way that you mightn't be with handwritten stuff. It's not oral text, right? And also what happens is it's explicit in ways that oral things are not. I've got to refer explicitly to things. So it's got a whole lot of characteristics which make it powerful. What's powerful, though, it's just about the whole of the human experience, which is in these LLMs. And what it does, by mapping the distributional structure of morphemes, it actually is, coming across what we call a latent semantics. It has no concept of semantics itself, but it ends up being a marker for these whole patterns of meaning. And in a way, this is how text semantic AI, if you like, is a proxy for the mechanics of thinking.
We've spoken a lot so far about the theories and practices that are evolving as a consequence of large language models and the impact they have on our understanding of language. But as educators, it's not enough for us to be theoretical and think broadly about these things. We also have to create the tools, harness what's available to us in the large language models and in the digital moment, and create the tools that meet our values. And what we've done ourselves in our own work and at our own university is to produce what we call cyber scholar learning. These are tools for thinking with writing that take on board the power of the large language models, but are able to control the use of them in ways that enhances learning, doesn't do cognitive offloading, and doesn't hallucinate. So we can't go into this at depth at the moment, but the main point here is that the tools we have at the moment and the learning management systems are not architected to address these issues for language, and this Cyber Scholar case study is our offering in relation to how we might move forward.
So quick explanation of the architecture. On the left is a multimodal editor. It's not just typing, but you can actually put in all sorts of media. On the right is generative AI support of all kinds, mediated in a number of ways, which Mary will go over a little bit in the next slide. So, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture the relationship between your cognitive work on the left and this kind of metacognitive prompting, if you like, on the right from the generative AI. The generative AI doesn't give you answers, it just keeps on making suggestions. But what we're doing with the contextual AI on the left, which is keystrokes and click streams and timestamps, we're keeping a record of the thinking that you do in relation to the AI. We're trying to build a kind of, if you like, a way of saying, look, use all the AI that you want to use. It's incredibly helpful. It'll push your thinking, but we're going to know when it's actually producing cognitive offloading because we can see what you're doing and your relationship with the AI is very, very transparent.
So just to summarize what we've just said and to kind of share with you the elements that we've put into producing this tool, the Cyber Scholar tool. And the first thing is we can't send our students into the AI wild, into just out there without shaping what they go into. So we've produced a bounded corpus. Anyone can do it. You can do it around any subject, music, history, whatever. We do it around the issues that we teach.
Oh, and a footnote to that, by the way, anyone can do it in the sense that we've built a place where you upload your own corpus, which gets vectorized and the weights get built. Right. So, yeah, so that's just to explain
we've built
how everyone can do it. Yeah.
We've built a pedagogical platform where you can do this, which is uniquely architected to allow us to engage with AI in a controlled way. So first of all, we have the bounded corpus, which includes text, lists of readings, any kind of artifact you want to put into it in any kind of subject area. The second element that we think is really important is that we have what we call rubric agents. That is that the instructor actually crafts through the rubrics the way in which a learner engages with the corpus, and also the way in which what they produce is evaluated. And the third part is analytics. It's possible within these spaces to track the learner's performance because it can be captured in a digital space, but that you have assess as you go so that you give feedback immediately to the learner, not waiting till the end of a particular course or a particular program.
Including AI feedback.
Yes. So we've built into this feedback from AI, feedback from peers, and feedback from instructors as well, and that gets fed into the analytical tools. But the most important thing that we've done, because of all the anxiety that's out there, and because we need to do it, is to architect this pedagogical platform with the capacity to track creativity. We're able to create a log that shows us what the learner has done on their own creatively, and the degree to which they've taken on board AI advice or information or content. And we can see very clearly what has happened. We encourage students, and we must encourage them, and they will do it anyway, to harness AI as the helper that it can be in the production of any particular exercise that they have to do. But we also need to know how much they take on board. And in this model that we've set up, this pedagogical platform, we've architected the AI so it doesn't produce answers, but it produces support, whether it's for note-taking or for research, so that the learner can enhance what they're doing as a consequence of the help that the AI provides with them, not using the AI to respond to a particular assignment or task, mostly as a consequence of what it offers.
Now, some questions about the future of language learning, just to come closer to the end of this video. There's a woman there with her Apple earpods, and connected to her phone. And what it will do, it'll do simultaneous translation. Why do we need to learn another language anymore? So we've got this focusing now on learning other languages. And really importantly then, what will AI generally do to the knowledge economy? Do we need language teachers anymore? Maybe. Well, I'm being provocative now. Maybe we don't. I'm going to say in a second how we can sort of still do good but different things in language learning. But, right through the knowledge economy, be it software development, be it management consultants, be it lawyers, this AI is going to be profoundly disruptive, which is basically not just generative AI, but the bolting of the previous two generations onto that third generation of AI.
However, educators remain critical in scaffolding and creating the means by which students engage with AI in the production of anything, in any discipline. It can't be left simply to using AI to respond to tasks. We have to create the scaffold and the components that make it continue to make learning a creative exercise.
Right. But on the other hand, there are some of these paradoxical possibilities. Could text semantic AI make imperial languages less powerful? Why do you need to learn English anymore? If you're, somewhere in the world where English is not the main language, you can just put your things in your ear and off you go. The other very interesting phenomenon is what's called low resource languages. And what's very interesting is even languages which don't have a big web corpus to scrape. What you can do is with very limited resources, you can have them to leverage the underlying semantics in other languages. Now, remember we said before, what these machines actually do is they deal with latent semantics, and you can actually then create curriculum resources on all sorts of general subjects like, water resources or environment or anything that's general to the world in any language, including languages with a very small corpus. And then if you want to make it sensitive to local conditions, just add some material about local conditions, some local stories, some local environment issues. So incredible potentials in terms of disrupting the world of language learning. What I wanted to mention now also is this notion of translanguaging. It was a Welsh word invented by Sen Williams, and that is that increasing now people are in these multilingual situations, and again, this AI might be a way to transparently move backwards and forwards between languages. In our Cyber Scholar space, you can swap between languages with gay abandon as much as you want to, and the interesting thing is the AI will explain how it's mapping one language to another. Look, I think I'll say it this way because it's nuanced this way. It's not quite the right word in this language, but. So in other words, these are environments where, because they're multilingual, we could actually learn a lot about language by allowing the machine to work with us in translating. So in other words, I'm a Chinese student. My English is not 100%. My written English is not 100%. And therefore, I'm going to move backwards and forwards between English and in order to think my thoughts, in order to express myself. And in fact, what this does, this builds on a whole lot of traditions which are integral parts of language teaching. So let's hope we can actually modify or we can leverage these old ideas about code switching, bilingualism, polylingualism, multiliteracies, to the extent that it deals with language differences. Let's hope we can use the AI to deepen what it is we're doing in language learning rather than displace it.
Well, it's not just hope. We think the affordances of these tools will allow us to do that, right, if we're able to rethink our disciplines and our pedagogies and methodologies.
So one of the words we use is transposition, all sorts, multimodal transposition, movements between one language and another. And last slide, this is our multiliteracies pedagogy, and here are just a few suggestions of what we might do in language learning going forward. And we're talking here about another language learning, not just language learning in the first language. Here are some things we might do to work with AI productively to develop deeper and more effective and more long-lasting effects in language learning. But the most important point is it's a new game now. We've got to, as language educators, we've really got to get on top of AI, and there are all sorts of implications about how we can do things differently and hopefully better.
It does require, however, collaboration. These are things that you can't do by yourself anymore because we need tech people and we need an interdisciplinary approach to it. The way in which we train teachers and the way in which we do professional development requires really serious rethinking in this context if we're going to prepare our learners for a future that is quite complex, quite challenging, both with massive opportunities and dangers, which many people are anxious about during this time.